Good morning, everybody. So nice to see such a full room. We were a little bit worried that we had a small room, but it's better to be really uncomfortable and warm together, I think. It's better for our egos, and then when you go outside later, it's going to be nice and fresh air. Welcome very much. My name is Sanne Schim van der Loeff. I'm the Managing Director at Arena for Journalism in Europe, and I'll be moderating this panel today. So before I introduce my fellow panelists here, I want to give a quick introduction on what we'll be talking about today, because you may have noticed that it's quite an extensive title and quite an extensive introduction text. But what we really want to be talking about today is challenges and opportunities to funding, structural funding, in the independent public media sector. And as you'll notice, all the panelists here with us have very different experiences, and that's what we want them to talk about. The overarching purpose, of course, is to advocate for the public interest media sector to receive more funding, more structural funding. And I'm sure that most people will agree with that. Before I go to the panelists, I want to get a bit of an idea of who we have in this room. So we're going to do a very school-like exercise. If you can put up your hand if you're a journalist. And if you're working for what you would consider a public interest media organization. And how many of you are both a journalist and working in such an organization? And then the last question, how many of you have ever worried about financial sustainability of your own work? Okay, good. So we know why we're here, that's really good. One final note, all the members here of this panel are part of the Reference Independent Media Circle, which is a network we set up to fill the gap in this type of knowledge exchange and supporting each other on the non-editorial and funding side. Yeah, that's been really useful, and that's why we're here. And I want to start now with giving the floor to Jan-Willem. Let me just put on your presentation. We wanted to give you also some visual cues, of course, because otherwise we'll just be talking at you all the time. Yeah, it's in video.
Okay, hello, I'm Jan-Willem Sanders from Follow the Money. I'm the publisher and one of the co-owners. And we are a platform, and we love to call ourselves radically independent. We only focus on investigative journalism. Oh, this goes faster than expected. This is the slide where I like to brag. This was our revenue last year, and we grew 65%, especially by we gained an extra group of 5,000 paying subscribers. And also we introduced our own book publisher. But we are a platform of investigative journalism based in Amsterdam and in Brussels. And we are very proud we invested because we have a growing membership base. We could invest in our own team of data journalists, and we started our own bureau Brussels, which is a team of 6 journalists who are permanent in Brussels in investigating the EU. And sad enough, we are the biggest team in Brussels, so there's a lot to do over there. And we also started with a cross-border investigation and collab with a lot of other news outlets. We did this last year for 3 different projects which we initiated, and we like to say we do the heavy lifting in, which means that we coordinate, we bring all the partners together, and we also build all the data sets. So that's in a nutshell, Follow the Money.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sofia. I'm a journalist, and in 2014 I co-founded Divergente. That is a digital magazine of narrative journalism. We believe we make the difference because we portray big subjects and big issues of our societies, telling stories from bottom up. That means that we try to give a stage to people that are not often listed in the legacy media. Climate change, LGBTQ, more rights, colonial past, unemployment are some of the subjects we address, and we address it always with a critical eye. We try to give a context and not just presenting the facts. Here are some photos of our team. They were too quick. They were too quick, but okay. So, and we can see we send physical letters. We write it with our own hands, and we send it to our audience. Then we can see some photos of us doing a reportage in Mozambique, or winning the Spanish King Prize, and in a routine day in our newsroom. And in the end, there is a QR code with where you can access directly to the stories I've shown before.
Thanks. I apologize for the Dutch efficiency, thinking that 5 seconds would be enough.
And from our side, we will have a short video so that you can hear directly from our investigative journalists across Europe about why Investigate Europe.
And it will be very uncomfortably cut off after 2 minutes, because otherwise we'll still be here later.
It all started with the Euro crisis. It was not only an economic catastrophe, it was also a big media failure.
Most of the newspapers and most of us were doing journalism without the contextual interpretation, the explanation needed for the crisis itself. And we decided to create Investigate Europe.
Today we are in a globalized society. Big companies don't have borders. You need to have a collective response to that.
Many journalists work as lonely wolves. I think this is quite wrong. Much better is to work in teams and to overcome this competition issue, which basically is only the commercial logic of our employers. But it is not the logic of journalism to always compete against each other.
Cross-border journalism means that you exchange on eyesight. It's not parachuting journalism, go to another country, staying for 3 days, paying a fixer to do your story you already made up at your desk at home.
I've never researched topics so deeply.
Each time that we do a story, we almost write a book.
Better international journalism than I could have done by myself. It is not global, it is not local, it is both a local journalism.
We take the local, but we exchange it with the transnational, and then we come back to the local and it has another taste.
It's new model. Of course, it's a kind of troublemaker because we spend hours on discussions.
An Investigate Europe meeting is like a box of chocolate and you never know what you get. It's really, how do we start? What is the first sentence of a story? We discuss it.
For more, you can go to the Investigate Europe website and you can watch the rest of the movie. What I'm hoping that I'm just going to disconnect this. What I'm hoping that these introductions show to all of you is that all the organizations that we're working with or that work in part of this network have a similar purpose. They've all come, and I'm summarizing here, but they all work from a need-based approach with the public value and their the public value in mind. And the financial challenges that they have, they vary, but they do still have challenges around financial sustainability and stability. So that's kind of where I want to start off the conversation as well. And ask, and maybe start all the way on the right and move left again, ask all of you to sketch what the field, what this public interest media field is like in your perspective, and maybe also place your organization within that field. What are the challenges that you face, but also how have you approached some of these challenges? Maybe we can set the scene that way a little bit.
Well, we are a little bit blessed in the Netherlands that we have an audience who is willing to pay for journalism and also have the money for it. So that I think that makes us a little bit different to some other countries in Europe. And of course we started our platform 10 years ago or 12 years ago, and in 2016 we pivot to a membership model, and it was a little bit inspired by The Correspondent, and we thought, well, if they can do it, perhaps it's also possible with a platform for 100% investigative journalism. And luckily for us, we succeeded in that. And the big challenge in the beginning is that to build our own audience of paying subscribers, we need to have a runway of structure finance because it took us 4 years to get to 15,000 paying subscribers, and we doubled since the Corona pandemic, and now we are at 40,000. But the first 10,000, that was the big struggle, and that was the phase where we needed the most support from. We have in the Netherlands the Stimulation Fund, which helped us. We had some funding from organizations like Adesium, and they helped us to not with project funding, but with structure funding, and for us that made a really big difference. And then I think it's honest to say, if there wasn't that kind of structure of finance, we wouldn't be here at and say that we are still vital.
In 2014, when we co-founded Divergente, at least from my knowledge, there were no independent media registered in Portugal. That means there is a rising sector. And that guy that is over there, when we began, we just knew that we needed to have something to show, because otherwise no one would believe us. No one would believe that we would be capable to do multimedia journalism, deep journalism with a very strong visual approach. And I'm talking from Portugal. That means that no philanthropic culture, no public support to journalism, and no institutions or associations that supports independent journalism. But we didn't give up. And 3 years ago, we got a grant from Civitas that supports public interest journalism in Europe, and it was a game changer because that allowed us to have a newsroom with 5 people and have the feeling, oh, we are professionals and we are doing it in a professional way. To finish, we also try to sources of revenue. We do partnership with universities. That means that in one way we facilitate workshops, but we also adapt academic investigations to journalistic stories. We apply for grants, of course, and we have an audience that supports us. My last point, grants. We need structural funding because grants that support specific stories are not enough. And that means also that at least in Portugal, we always have to be partner of another country in Europe, and sometimes that means also that we are not allowed to address our own issues and our own problems, and that's also agenda setting.
Okay, so the challenges are many, as you heard from Investigate Europe. There's a crazy idea of a couple of individuals who left their newsrooms in good positions and good jobs to do something different that they believed is important, cross-border journalism in an investigative, best possible way. How to operationalize that across Europe, big challenge, no money initially. So you really depend on a few angel investments by either private individuals or group of individuals, or really foundations that believe in public interest media and are willing to take that risk and support you on that. We were fortunate enough that Harald and Elisa, who you both saw in the video, are German-based, and they managed to tap into that understanding in Germany, similar privilege to the Dutch situation. So that was really kind of the initial push when this was still a project, an idea, but it quickly turned into something different, something operationalized in a different way. And because this group combines people from 12 different countries, then you can imagine, like we are in this room, different languages, different cultures, different approaches to things, different understanding of each of the word that you discuss, not only in terms of what you're going to investigate, but how you're going to be organized, what is a deadline. So in terms of financing, we first, well, I wasn't there then, I only joined a year ago, and I made a switch from a funder that used to support this, not myself directly, but I kind of brought in that knowledge of what foundations think of and why and how they tick, which is important, mainly because they give you the freedom to do what you want, and not just because maybe Soros is funding you, you have to do something. So it's important to navigate that detail of how you're gonna be approached and seen in the world when you are funded by private foundations, a challenge and a blessing at the same time. Structural funding, great, because you get it from them, but then you are hooked to a name that you kind of have to justify yourself, so that's a challenge. You counter that by own earnings, you know, be it through selling articles that you try because you believe in public interest media and public interest, but you also believe in the value that this has, and you try to convince readers to donate to that, but we don't necessarily have the same model as Follow the Money. We just simply ask, subscribe to a newsletter. If you like what you read, please donate a little bit. So we are not as kind of structured in that sense yet. And then the third avenue is private donations / this kind of structural funding that we get. But for me, what is beautiful and challenging is that we have created a European cooperative. So that it's the people who own, the investigative journalists who own the place where they work. Now, as you can imagine, me as a non-journalist coming in with my project management experience, you face a lot of barriers in understanding. Those of you who are journalists and have to do the operational side will know how challenging that is, but the other side is also sometimes a challenge, you know, to break that barrier down in what we're talking about. The importance of having certain structures in place, certain operational structures in place, because in the end of the day, if we check EU for transparency, we need to be transparent ourselves. So these kind of things pop up for us when we think about sustainability and the future, and how to do that across borders and not just maybe in a country or two, and that's maybe what makes us different.
Thanks all of you. A practical note, we want to make this as open for questions as possible. They did say that it's a bit hard with a microphone during the session. We'll definitely leave some time at the end. If anybody does have a burning question throughout, look at me really nicely and smile, and then I can repeat the question so that people on the live stream can hear it. I see somebody smiling at me, yes.
Hi, so my name is Matjasic. I am a journalist and I'm the founder of Gender Calling.
Oh, okay, that saves me time.
Okay, so hi, I'm Catarina Marques Rodrigues. I am from Portugal as well. I'm the founder of Gender Calling, which is a media platform about women and minorities. And I was very curious about the other ways of funding journalism. Sofia mentioned, for example, the workshops. I'm also doing those workshops about how to cover women's issues and doing them with journalists that are starting now. So, and then I use that money to fund my work as a journalist for Gender Calling. So for Follow the Money, but also for Investigate Europe, do you have other ways, alternative ways of funding this journalism that are not an option?
If you don't mind, I'm just going to generalize the question a bit more, because I think you make a really good point about how can we use other forms of income to fund our organizations. And I would like to redirect it specifically to you, maybe first, Jan-Willem, because Follow the Money is a for-profit organization, which we don't see very often. So maybe you can speak a little, or at least, sorry, in our very small environment that I am currently speaking from, obviously, limited, I realize. In this particular setting, can you speak a little bit to that choice and indeed how you then also can navigate these different income streams? And then maybe you can follow up after.
For us, the grants and subsidies are 15% of our total revenues, and the other income is from paying subscribers. So we are very lucky at the moment that we have 70% of our revenue is from paying subscribers, and the other 15% is from our own bookstore. Which we introduced last year, and I think that for us that's a perfect mix at the moment, because we are not dependent anymore for our future on the subsidies and grants, and for the goal for us is to increase the number of paying subscribers even more, and I hope that we could reach the point of 50,000, and it helps us to make those fundamental investments, which which is hard to do if you are dependent on grants and subsidies. For example, if you want to make a deep investment by starting your own data team, it's more risky if you only have a runway of 1 or 2 years. But our revenue stream of paying subscribers is really predictable. We know exactly how the percentage of people we can expect which will not continue their membership, and we know how much conversion we have in the new audience. So at the moment we are very predictable, and we use the grants for the most risky future projects or investments. So cross-border investigation is actually, in a business way, a very bad idea, because you give away a lot of your effort for free, and those kind of projects we fund now with grants. Yeah.
And maybe I can compliment from our side. You know, we are a non-profit, charitable European cooperative, but being non-profit doesn't mean you don't have a business model. So it's really important to think things through how you go around that. We fully subscribe and believe profoundly into the value of what we do and the value it has for public discourse, public debate, and we try to lay foundation for debate by doing this, maybe sometimes investigations into things that are not so sexy or known at the moment, like Energy Charter Treaty, anyone? By the EU, that has become a hot topic recently because this treaty is now going to be discontinued. And this is something Investigate Europe researched into and made valid points back then when nobody was talking about it. This was thanks to having that kind of cushion of support by either generous private donations that you received or a funding that is structural and allows you to do these things in a more long term. But I think, for us to then go to what we are trying to explore similar to Follow the Money is the streams from our readers. I've kind of, within 1 year that I've been here, I've experienced the difficulty of how do I translate something that is cross-border and European in its core, in its nature, into the different national audiences and realities. And that's not so easy, because every model I saw in terms of how do you do outreach well is based on either national context or language. So for example, we officially speak 4 languages at the moment on our website: English, French, German, and Italian. And we have, opportunity for people to donate from all of those, but there's 0 from Italy, very little from France, mainly from Germany. And I don't know if that's because we were born there, so to speak, with one of our founders and a big name in the German context, or is it something else? We are trying to figure that out. We will be able to test it. I can give you a sneak preview that we are going to launch Spanish soon. And we will see if that, then gives us an alternative. But if we don't have the structural funding initially to do the quality journalism that we want to do on topics that we decide as a team to do, then we won't be able to reach the people who would be interested in recognizing that value. So it's kind of a vicious circle. It's a catch-22. If you don't have that, you don't have the energy to do it and the time to bandwidth to do it, then you won't get support. Or it's, sometimes you're lucky, but sometimes you need to get this structural funding or a break to be able to do it.
Can I just say?
Yes.
I forgot to mention source of revenue we have at Divergente is that we don't have paywalls, and we always try to reduce the distance between people and journalists. That means journalists are not in the top of the hill. on the top of the hill. So every time we publish a new feature, we organize public events and public debates, and we invite people to come and to discuss with us that subject. And that means that we may not have 1,000 likes on Facebook, but we are sure that we addressed those 100 people that were at that room in that day.
Could I maybe ask you to elaborate on that a bit? Because when I was listening to Peter and he was talking about the idea of a business model and the advantage of having structural funding, and then going back to what you were saying at the beginning, where getting structural funding in and within Portugal is very difficult. You almost always have to partner up with other organizations to get that done. That is what the situation Peter is describing would be near impossible, I would imagine, for Divergente, or not?
Yeah, it would be very difficult because we have a different reality, and Europe is not homogeneous. If we talk about South Europe, it's a completely different reality from Central Europe. So yes, it would be impossible for us. And I have the feeling, because we can do it because we love what we do. And I have the feeling that sometimes we do some magic, and in the end, I don't know why we got the money to keep going. So it would be impossible, I think.
So then if we were to change this magic into hopefully something more structural, what, and this is a question, the first one of you that thinks of a good answer can steal the mic. What are the kind of changes that you would like to see happen? And they can be, let's start maybe with a dreamlike scenario, but also maybe a practical solution. What are the type of changes we would like to see in our environment? And we're, of course, speaking on a European level, but we already know that that's very different country per country, that could facilitate these changes in a more structural way, where maybe we could bring some of this structural support more together. This is going to be really awkward silence.
Well, as Sanne mentioned, we are part of the same group of the reference circle. And what was for me an eye-opener when I met all my colleagues from other European countries is that the structure we have in the Netherlands does not exist in most other European countries. That we have the Dutch stimulation funds, we have private funds who understand how to support us. So they don't support us on a project basis, but most of the times on a structural basis. And I think if we could make that a little bit more a European policy than just a local policy in the Netherlands, I think that would be a great opportunity, especially in the countries where you don't have audiences who have the money to pay for journalism.
Well, I would like to have an European fund that addressed the specific realities of the different countries, and why not a specific fund for South Europe and to address our own issues. And I forgot what I was going to say, so I will pass the word to Peter, and then if I remember, I will come back.
Obrigado. For me, it would be important that there's more understanding of what is European. What does it actually mean in practice that you do? And I know some of you in the room are also doing this, proper European stories based. Because we constantly, when we are fighting inside the team about, what's going to make the pitch for the next big story, we never think about it in a monetizing way. We always think about what we want to do. Is that wrong? I don't know. I believe it's, maybe partly naive, but very much in the spirit of public interest. So I would want to have more recognition that for issues that affect European citizens directly need to be funded by EU money or by EU citizens, or that there's some sort of a return. So maybe I'm subscribing to, to the idea that Sofia launched about the European fund, but I also would like that there is more understanding from national media, including our media partners. We have media partners in 13 countries that are buying our articles, and then they put it behind paywall, which puts us in a bit of a difficult situation because we don't believe in paywall ourselves on our own channels. But you know, we have this dichotomy, and there's this misconception, and then you have this lovely story from cross borders with different angles, and then suddenly a media says, I'm no, not interested, because that's not relevant for my country. And that happens with funders as well. You know, you will have many funders who would say, no, Portugal, Spain, where I live at the moment, is not relevant for us because we don't understand and we don't have the funding. So yes, there should be something more tailor-made to understand the needs of the specificities. That is not just, oh, Poland is and Hungary are in a challenging position. Italy is in a challenging position. We are here in Italy and we don't have funding for this country and everything that's going on with the current government right now. So, you know, we need to think along those terms as well, how to protect that.
That kind of partnerships with legacy media, we also do it at Divergente, and we always ask, our works can't be closed by a paywall, because if we don't do that in our own project, so you wouldn't do that when you publish it. And about what you were saying, that Spain and Portugal may not interest to funders, it's it, because we are not poor enough and we are not rich enough. So to be in the gray areas, it's a pity.
I know we are in a privileged situation in the Netherlands, but a paywall is not a religion. So don't believing in paywalls sounds for me a little bit strange, because there are also situations where a paywall is very successful. I'm very pleased with the one we use. We have what we like to call a time-based paywall. So we try to create a perfect mix between journalistic impact and membership goals. So on the day of publication, you can read an article for free, and that's the most important day for journalistic impact. And the second day, and that's when we harvest on the business side, and we make it very easy to get free access. But we make it we try to push people to register for our newsletter, and we try if you learn our product and our mission, that's the most important thing we sell. We don't sell access to our content, but we sell a mission, and I think that is something which we have in common. And I think a paywall or a time-based paywall could be successful in Portugal as well. So I think there is an opportunity on the membership side.
And hold on, before you react, I think this is where we want to go, right? We want to disagree with each other so we all learn something from each other. No, but I think this is a good thing, so I do want to hear your response, Sofia, and maybe also in the broader thought of, we talk now about ideally we want there to be a European fund, but at the same time, we don't want there to be a European fund because that also touches upon ethical issues about, do we really want the EU to be paying for our stuff? So maybe you can also answer Jan-Willem, but also in this broader idea of touching again upon these differences that we also have in the European field.
So I think paywall is not a religion, of course, but we decided for not having paywalls because we believe that the journalism we do should be accessed by different people and by people who don't have the money to pay for it. So we have not a big, but a very solid audience who pays and who supports us because they believe the work we do is important. And it will seem like a religion, but the feedback we receive is like the feeling of being divergent, that it's having a close relationship with the people who support and who follow us. And I believe that in the future it will give us more money than creating paywalls.
The one summarizing note I want to make, what I think is really interesting about this conversation, and maybe you guys can think about that a bit more, is that you're all speaking very much from the public-driven part, right? You're driven by what your public and what your readers want. How does that kind of battle this idea of financial stability? Wanting to be public-driven. How has that? Has there been a time where that's really screwed you over because you want to be well, serving the public in a financial way?
Well, it's a difficult knot to crack, but I can try. I'll maybe rephrase your question, but for us, one of the two levels. So once, as I said, on the engagement level with audiences that are across Europe, in our case, and in different countries, you know, how do you tailor the message? You have to then suddenly have 10 people who would work on outreach in each of the country. Obviously, we don't have the resources for that, but what we did invest in, there are not that many out there that have this, an audience engagement producer that is specifically going to help us look and understand and be more professional in that sense of, you know, some of the things that Follow the Money and others already do in terms of how you understand your audience and engage with them in a different way than maybe we have done now. We had an outreach community coordinator, but we kind of pivoted to really understand and go into this nitty-gritty of what Google initiatives of the world tell you, you know, how to really read the audience that you have and then see if you can capitalize that in different ways, where I still stick to more Sofia's model of not paywall, but your own contribution. But I don't, you know, want to devalue what Jan-Willem is saying, and it can be a valuable model if you choose to, but it's more of a value proposition that you need to agree with if that works for you or not. So obviously there are different models and availabilities out there. But the other point is more around, and I'm getting lost in my head because I had something that I wanted to mention. In terms of the EU, we were there a bit before Follow the Money with 3 people, and now they have overrun us with 6 investigative journalists. But you know, when you want to take on the EU and report from the Brussels bubble, for a long time we have this conversation in Investigate Europe. We cannot take EU's money because we are investigating the EU, and this has been an internal, constant debate. That can be similar to some of the other debates when it's money involved, right? So for now, we stick to that because it's not related to, we can take something if it's related to reference or where we are working on operations, but not on any influence on the story. But this is a conundrum in my head because I'm an EU citizen paying my taxes, and it's in the public's interest that as a EU citizen, I know about things, so I should be able to take the money so that I can, so this whole narrative around EU paying for itself is a false narrative in my personal opinion, but you know, there are divergent views on that. So that's where my head is really spinning because it's public interest, and the EU is not there as a monster in my opinion, but it can do monstrous things. So that's why you need to hold it account to the policy level, but not as itself.
We have one question. Is it related to this point just being made, the question?
I have a question related to brand image and brand name. So
sure, yeah, go ahead, and then Sofia will get your reaction after.
So my question was more about the importance of your image as an organization, as a media organization, and your brand name, and how do you manage that now in terms of monetizing your brand name with all the complexities, with integrity issues, maybe climate change issues that are affecting our work as well. So what are for you the top 3 opportunities to increase your brand image, to monetize it and bring it into value?
Sofia, maybe you can also answer that and then react.
Yeah, well, to be completely honest, we are not public-driven. We try at Divergente always come back to the questions, why do we decide to create a project like that? And we decide to create a project like that because we wanted to tell stories from a different approach, giving another vision to subjects that maybe we hear about every day, but we have never thought in the way we portray them. And to monetize, that's a very interesting question because we have debated it a lot in our newsroom because we are trying to find social indicators to monetize our work. And that means, for example, how many of the people we have interviewed at Divergente have never been interviewed before by a media outlet. And I may say that the majority of the people we have listened in the last 10 years, I don't know if the majority, but most of them have never been listened by a journalist or interviewed by a journalist.
actually, it's quite surprising that we have that a lot of people have a constant idea of our brand, because until 1 month ago we didn't have somebody who curated all our brand and our identity. We have this logo with an eye, and I think there were 10 different versions. But I think the thing which really makes our brand is, of course, our journalism, and the stories we make is always really on the facts. It's always very how do you say it? Grondig, thorough. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the publications we have, that's the fundament of our brand, and I think it will become better now. Now we have somebody who really takes care of our logos and brands and makes sure that we are consistent and all those kind of things. Yeah. And what I like to add was, I think there is an opportunity for brands like us in the new AI thing. I think trustful brands are becoming more and more and more important, and I think for journalistic organizations there's a really big opportunity to be still the safe haven of content you can trust.
And just quickly, I mean, I came in and this was already there, Investigate Europe, and I was thinking about a tagline, but actually you don't need a tagline if you already have such a good brand name, Investigate Europe, that tells what you're doing. You're investigating European issues. But then we have a lot of debates internally. Should we be investigating a changing Europe? How do you sell that? How do you present yourself? It's not easy, and because we are a cooperative and we want to, make sure that people have a say on all this, people who also don't necessarily know about these things have a say on this, which is a good thing from the perspective of participation and democratization of such organizations. But then maybe from a monetizing professional business perspective, it's not always easy to come to a conclusion. And I think we're still evolving in that process of how do we best present ourselves. I've heard that our logo maybe looks, when you quickly look at it, too much as The Economist. I don't know, but there's a lot of things that we could look into. It's just that I think we suffer, like many others in this position, of not ever having the bandwidth or time to think about this more thoroughly, about the branding, than we maybe should.
Let me say one thing about brand. Well, we, at Divergente, since we are we stand for visual approach, we invest a lot in our communication materials that I will put circulating in the room, and also we invest on design and that stuff, but we really believe that the best brands we can have is trustful journalism. And and we prefer to invest on proofreaders, on revisions, than on marketing.
There's a question at the back.
Hi, thank you. Jelena Berkovic from Croatia, a sister media outlet, Faktograf. I want to come back to the European media sphere issue, and wonder whether you have been doing, I mean, it's very inspirational to hear about reference and the black sheep finally being coordinated, self-coordinated, but I wonder whether it may be too ambitious at this point in time, but then again, when, if not now, to try to influence the European Media Freedom Act discussions, because they will definitely arrange and regulate European media sphere, by the end of this year. So it will, coming from captured markets and captured states, I think even in this place we might want to investigate whether the whole issue of media freedom and regulation is being media captured or captured by media. I wonder if you're doing anything in that sense in trying to perhaps influence how the EU is going to define what media is and what journalism is, and most specifically, how to protect on a systematic, structural way the independence of the editorial teams and the editorial integrity. Thank you.
And this question is specifically related to the reference network, you mean? Yeah. Does anybody of you want to tackle this, or do you want me to tackle it?
That's a perfect question for you, Sanne.
I have to stay sharp. I didn't think I was going to be answering any questions today. No, I'm going to give you a very unsatisfactory answer, and that is that, you know, with the reference circle is now just over a year old. So we're not in the space of agenda setting yet. The ambitions are obviously there, because you hope that if you have a solid reference network of European organizations, eventually you can make those changes and have that conversation around media freedom at a European level. But we're also trying to do this properly, meaning that we want to set up the structures properly first, have a good network, have a strong network, have a diverse network, and then start looking into how are we going to address that conversation at a higher level. We're trying to do something that I am personally always very uncomfortable with, which is going slow at the start and then make sure that we do the work properly later on.
Maybe I can just add that this is exactly on this topic something we've recently discussed, and it comes back to, for us internally, this push and pull between how much you as a journalist, an investigative journalist, remain objective and, you know, report on issues and investigate the issue, and where you turn into potentially perceived as, but not a bad word, activist, and how do you navigate those two spaces, specifically on such a thing where you and your profession is directly affected. There's definitely, you know, part of our team that is or wants to or investigate this and is doing something around this internally, but we have not gone public on any of that yet. But, you know, this brings that question to me and to our team, because we are, imagine this, 16 journalists from 12 different countries, you know, no one else has that at the moment, these different perspectives that are kind of thought with each other constantly to then decide, because somebody will say, this matters to me, and somebody who comes from Poland or Hungary will say, we are over here with this kind of conversation and we don't even want to hear it, while somebody who is at the beginning of, you know, a pivotal moment like in Croatia and Slovenia where it could change things, would be maybe more relevant. So I don't have the answer yet, but we are looking into that, and we're curious to hear who else is.
I want to be a bit mindful of the time, because we have 5 minutes of the clock, and I think you had a question, right? Yes.
Test. Okay. Hi, I'm Julia. I work as a correspondent in Lebanon, and among others for an independent magazine only for female correspondents. So we have a similar approach to you, meaning that we have another, let's say, focus on how foreign reporting is done, and that's our value proposition. And what we found is very, very challenging to have a membership-based business model without big funders in the back. So I'm really interested if you could tell a bit more about advertisement and how you found your members, and yeah, do you know who they are, where they're from, how did you reach them? Yeah, follow the money, and for you, yeah.
Okay, so at Divergente we don't accept advertisements, so that question is answered. About our audience. How do we promote? Okay. Well, Divergente is almost 10 years, so now we are in a different position than we were 10 years ago. We have been building up an audience. First it was by mouth, and then we always try, I think we always publish our features in legacy media, in Portugal and sometimes abroad. That means that we can reach a larger audience than just the ones who follow Divergente, and that contributes a lot to increase the number of people who is following us. And then I think that one of our most important channel of communicating with people is our monthly newsletter. It's a very careful, with a very careful writing, with a very close approach to people. We try always tell a story in our newsletter. That means you have the feeling you are receiving something special. It's not something that it was written in 2 days and you could have done it without thinking about. And I would say that that's what we have been doing these years.
Is there one more burning question? If you can keep it short and the panelists can keep it short, then we can do that.
How many subscribers do you have? How many subscribers do you have?
In our newsletter? So now we have 4,000. What for Portugal, it is quite good.
All right. I think we have 2 minutes left on the clock. So, oh, yeah.
So from following, you mean me or no?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could answer also the question from our colleagues. So how did you reach out to gain more members? Yeah. You mentioned 15,000, right, in the first 4 years?
Now we are now at the point of 40,000 paying subscribers, and before the pandemic it was 15,000. So we grew very fast in the last couple of years, but we tried to spend some money on advertisement, but it was one of our worst marketing ideas because for us nothing beats great journalism. And for example, today we have a story which makes national news, and it drives a lot of traffic to our website. We have a friendly paywall, and which is actually more like a registration wall. So we say if you subscribe for free to our newsletter, you get a 1 month access to all our publications. So that's the trade-off. And a lot of people on a daily basis are doing that. And to give you full clarity, I think on average around 150 people subscribe to our newsletter, and on average 10% of them become a paying subscriber. And the quality of the people who come via this route is a higher quality than people are start directly becoming a paying subscriber. So if you we nurture on the same way as Divergente with our newsletter. So and we send out every week we have a newsletter with our main stories, and we send it to everybody. And then on the end of the month we send a newsletter to all our audience, not only the paying subscribers but also the people who are reading our newsletter for free. Say these were the 3 stories which really tells why Follow the Money is on Earth. And these are not the stories which the highest numbers of readers, but these are the stories which made questions in Parliament, which really made a difference. And so it's the proof that we are on that we are more a mission-driven organization than a news-driven organization. Yeah.
I think that's a great line to end on. Nothing beats great journalism. Thank you, Jan-Willem, Sofia, and Pieter.